from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. We begin in Cuba, where today citizens are at the polling voting in a historic constitutional referendum. Cuba adopted its current constitution in 1976, when the Soviet Union was still a close ally. This is the first time since then that a major overhaul is taking place. If approved, the new constitution will lead to hundreds of changes. The most debated issues were the definition of marriage and private property. The new constitution will also limit presidential terms to 2 5-year terms. It will also reintroduce the post of prime minister. Our correspondent Luis Autier has the latest from Havana.
Yes, good morning. Today at 7 a.m. all the polling stations in Cuba opened their doors to celebrate the constitutional referendum. Today, February the 24th, an important day in Cuban history, as we have been saying. Right now I'm in a polling station in the municipality of Playa, the place in where without a doubt happened the news of the day. The President Diaz-Canel, the President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez arrived walking, not in a car as everybody was expecting. He arrived walking as any other neighbor in the area, and then he made the line with her wife, like a normal citizen. After he voted, he said he voted yes. After he voted, he offered a little speech, a short speech to the press, in where he said that this constitution is not only important for Cuba, but also for all Latin America and the Caribbean. And he had works for Venezuela that it's through a really complicated moment right now. We'll be informing more from other polling stations. We're moving around the city. Everything is happening with total calm, with total normality. And this is pretty much what we have right now. We'll be back with more later. Now I'm back to you.
We thank Luis for that report. Here's more of what President Diaz-Canel had to say about the historic referendum.
In the first place, we know we are taking part in a democratic and civil exercise. I would like to discuss 3 important elements. One, the moment we are voting. Another, what this day means for Cubans. And the other one, what this means to approve the new constitution. In the first place, we know we are living in a moment of imperialist threats. There is a clear attempt to impose a capitalist and neoliberal platform in all of Latin America, and it's being done in the worst and most perverse ways. And what we saw yesterday at the Venezuelan border is part of that plan, and this aggression is oriented to Latin American revolutions, the Bolivarian, the Sandinistas, the Cuban, but also to all Latin America. I think the first thing we have to learn is to defend our identities, the economic, the media, the ideological, but also cultural. And what they are trying to do is to fracture identities. They're trying to get people to deny their identities. Because with these fractures and the standardizations of U.S. culture, it's easy to dominate. So what's going on today in Venezuela, it could be applied anywhere in the world. What calls attention to this is the lack of dignity of some colleagues that give themselves to this. Yesterday, the group of presidents at the Colombian border looked like clowns. All those presidents have more troubles than those in Venezuela.
On Twitter, Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said he voted today for the continuity of the revolution. Rodriguez says voting yes ratifies the independence and sovereignty of socialist Cuba and reaffirms the will of majority. The president of Cuba's Electoral Commission, Alinea Balseiro, says voting is running smoothly so far.
Many volunteers are working at the polling stations. They are common citizens who have been trained to carry out this democratic electoral process. We are really happy because all the requirements have been fulfilled, and the process has been successful. Polling stations were open to the public at 7 a.m. All the ballot boxes were in place. Many people started voting early in the morning. The voting will continue until 6 p.m., when the Electoral Commission will start the vote counting process in front of all the people in every single polling station across the country, in order to give the national results as soon as possible.
Earlier, I was able to speak to author and journalist Arnold August from Montreal, Canada, for some insight into Cuba's constitutional reform. Let's have a look. Now, can you tell us a bit more about the massive participation within the consultation process over the last several months?
I think that the consultation process is one of the main features of the entire political process that's been going on for a couple of years. In fact, in last July, the National Assembly, or Cuba's parliament, after much debate amongst the elected deputies, worked out a draft of the Constitution in July. And it was decided that the draft Constitution be presented to the people all across the country, in workplaces, in neighborhoods, in educational centers, everywhere, for a 3-month period. That is, that took place from mid-August till mid-November, so that people could have their input with regards to the Constitution. And this, I was actually in Cuba at the time when this consultation was taking place. And in a nutshell, I would say that despite the stereotypes regarding Cuba, that's a closed society, there's no discussion, people are afraid to talk, it's actually the opposite. I have never seen such lively debate and discussion amongst the Cuban people, at the base, amongst journalists, intellectuals, on television, etc., regarding key points on the Constitution. Let us be clear, when the Constitution was presented and adopted in July of last summer, many people, right from the start, were not in agreement with all of the points of the Constitution. And thus, this provoked a very lively debate amongst the people with regards to certain articles in that Constitution. That consultation took place from mid-August till mid-November. And then in the last few months, the National Assembly had the responsibility of collecting literally hundreds and thousands of opinions of individual citizens in order to work out a new draft Constitution, which was just adopted very recently, and it is being presented to the people on a referendum to take place today throughout Cuba.
The constitutional reform in Cuba, approved by the National Assembly, has been debated for 3 months in communities and workshops. In this report, we learn more about the process that Cubans started last August.
In this research center for livestock improvement, the island's constitutional reform is being debated.
This is very important because we're making out the path we must go take. And in this particular case, we're looking forward to contributing to our country's development.
Scientists leave the laboratories for a few minutes to join the debate with their colleagues. Several topics are being discussed. One of them is same-sex marriage.
God created man and woman so they can procreate. And I think that was no mistake. That's why I think that it would be a big mistake to approve same-sex marriage. We won't be able to go back.
For others, same-sex marriage follows the humanist goal of the Cuban Revolution.
I don't think that we should do what the rest of the world does. This is about a constitution, and we are going to be able to hear what every citizen has to say, as each citizen will have the opportunity to vote for the constitution. We are defending a human right. It's not only from a historic or religious point of view, about giving citizens the opportunity to understand other citizens.
Participants of the referendum's first round agreed that the debate is a democratic expression of their country.
For us, being part of the constitutional reform debate alone is already important. The other important thing is to apply what our constitution says.
The first constitutional reform debate was done last August on Fidel Castro's 92nd birthday. For many, the Magna Carta that includes their political thinking is also a homage to the leader of the Cuban Revolution.
Now to Venezuela. Earlier we spoke with journalist and Hispan TV correspondent Alejandro Kirk about the current situation at the border with Colombia.
This is the bridge, Francisco de Paula Santander, between Escobar in Colombia and Ureña on the Venezuelan side. What happened yesterday had nothing to do with what we're seeing today. Today, Colombian authorities have taken over this place. Yesterday, this was controlled by the supporters of Guaidó, the self-proclaimed president of Venezuela, and were trying to take over not just the bridge, but break through with the trucks in order to deliver the so-called humanitarian aid over to the Venezuelan side. That did not happen, but an incident took place, which is very important as an incident because 2 trucks were burned and another truck was sacked. What happened here is that, according to Venezuelan authorities, what happened here was that an attempt to create a casus belli, a provocation in order to attack Venezuela militarily. The humanitarian aid that was supposed to go through, it didn't go. And in that sense, I would say that the Venezuelan side won. Today, there is a proof of that. The bridge, as you can see, the police is taking over. The authorities are preventing everybody to come over the place. The Venezuelan government broke relations yesterday, so the situation is still very tense. And it seems that normality has been restored.
Now for more on Venezuela, we're joined by Max Blumenthal from the Grayson Project. Max, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be on with you.
First, can you talk about what we saw unfold Saturday at the Venezuelan border?
Well, I wasn't at the border. I was listening to the statements from Western politicians like Marco Rubio, and I was noticing that they were making statements that were patently untrue. This also includes Iván Duque, Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, and they were accusing the Venezuelan National Guard of burning the aid trucks which were lined up on the Santander Bridge and using this as a kind of casus belli for escalation of sanctions against Venezuela and possibly even military intervention. And I took a look at all the available evidence, and it showed, first of all, that there is no evidence whatsoever of any Venezuelan guardsmen burning any of the aid trucks which were lined up on the Colombian side of the Santander Bridge, and all the evidence pointed in the other direction. The footage that you just showed, which is from NTN 24, which is a pro-opposition network, shows that the aid truck was completely surrounded by gorimberos, or the right-wing shock troops, the nihilistic rioters of the opposition. It showed fake Red Cross workers near the aid trucks, which have been condemned by the International Red Cross. And your correspondent, Madeline Garcia, who's on the ground there, produced photos showing youth with gas cans near the trucks. So it's pretty clear to me that these trucks were burned by the opposition who were surrounding the trucks, and that it was absolutely implausible that a tear gas canister from one of the Venezuelan national guardsmen could have started that kind of a fire. So what we're seeing is today escalation of the attack on Venezuela based on a completely ridiculous claim about what took place on the Santander Bridge.
And now, after these false flag attacks, what do you expect to happen Monday as U.S. Vice President Mike Pence meets with the Venezuelan opposition and the Lima Group?
You know, it's been unclear to me what was going to take place at every stage of this reality show coup. First of all, phase 1 failed, where the U.S. thought that the Venezuelan military would flip and all suddenly defect to this previously unknown figure, Juan Guaidó. Phase 2 has clearly failed. The aid trucks failed to get in, and it was revealed as a symbolic stunt aimed at crediting Nicolas Maduro and his government in international eyes and escalating the war on Venezuela. So in phase 3, I think we're going to see them look for new sanctions. It's unclear to me if a military intervention will take place that would be deeply unpopular among the American public and within even among the Democrats in Congress. Watching Trump's speech in Miami, it was pretty clear to me that for Donald Trump, he would like to intensify sanctions, have people in the streets of Venezuela calling for more food, seeing images of hungry people in U.S. media, so he can point to socialism in Venezuela as a means of discrediting opponents like Bernie Sanders, who is a self-described socialist.
Well, Max, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. Colombian diplomats are leaving Venezuela after President Nicolás Maduro broke diplomatic ties with the country's government. This video captured Colombia's staff walking with their suitcases over the Simón Bolívar International Bridge. This comes after Venezuela's government gave Colombia's personnel 24 hours to exit the country.
Colombia en San Cristóbal y San Antonio, cumpliéndose efectivamente lo decretado.
Maduro made the announcement Saturday as he addressed the crowds marching in Caracas in support of the country's sovereignty.
I cannot continue withstanding this. We cannot continue withstanding the territory of Colombia is given for an attack against Colombia. That's why I've decided to break all political and diplomatic relationships with the fascist government of Colombia and all their ambassadors and all the consuls who must leave in 24 hours time of Venezuela. Out of here, oligarchy. Out of here. Get out of here. Enough is enough.
Maduro was speaking to a demonstration in support of the Bolivarian Revolution. They demanded respect for Venezuela's sovereignty and condemned the attempts to intervene in the country. They say they will defend the gains of the last 2 decades.
I'm a member of the People's Militia and a teacher at the Bolivarian University, and what we want is to defend our revolution and the changes that this country has seen, which have been absolutely fundamental for the last 20 years.
The Argentinian Human Rights League has expressed its support for Maduro's government. In a statement, several organizations, such as Mothers of Plaza de Mayo and Sons of Disappear, said, quote, "The human rights organizations of Argentina declare ourselves in a state of alert and mobilization, while continuing the demand for full compliance with the principles of international law. This means the recognition of the elected authorities according to the national constitution. The popular will express itself at the polls. Democracy does not work under self-proclamation." José Miguel Insulza, former Secretary General of the OAS, said the operation carried out by the Trump administration was, quote, "a political operation, not a humanitarian one." On Twitter, he wrote, quote, "The Economist, citing the U.S. Embassy in Bogota as a source, says that the food collected reaches 5,000 people for 10 days and medicines for 10,000 for 90. The crisis is much greater than that. The operation is political, not humanitarian." He also criticized Chile's President Sebastián Piñera for supporting Venezuela's opposition leader. The International People's Assembly kicked off Sunday in Caracas, Venezuela. Committees from more than 80 countries are attending the event, which runs through February 27. The more than 400 members hope to deepen international solidarity and strengthen the fight against U.S. interference in Venezuela. More news in a minute. We'll be back. Welcome back. Votes are still being counted in Nigeria's presidential election. The Independent Electoral Commission says the results are expected to be in by Tuesday. Election day there was generally being described as peaceful despite an attack in the country's north and delays at some polling stations.
People are expectant. By this evening, tomorrow morning, next tomorrow, people will be waiting for a clean result.
In Somalia, 8 agencies say about 1 million people are being affected by worsening drought conditions. Climate change has been blamed for the harsh weather patterns in the nation, which has suffered from droughts, floods, and devastating cyclones in recent years. Malnutrition has also impacted children in displaced camps in the affected regions. There are more than 4 million people in need of humanitarian support in Somalia.
Food insecurity has affected not just the displaced persons, but also the host communities. Women and children remain the most affected in the affected regions. The condition will likely remain the same until a strategy is implemented that ensures vulnerable families can overcome climatic shocks.
A record number of Afghan civilians were killed last year due to aerial attacks by US-led forces and more suicide bombings. The United Nations reports that the conflict in Afghanistan claimed nearly 4,000 lives in 2018, leading to an 11% spike in civilian deaths versus 2017. The Afghan war started after US forces led a campaign to overthrow the Taliban following the September 11, 2001 attacks, and the conflict has recently intensified despite peace talks gaining momentum.
All parties need to take immediate and additional concrete steps to stop a further escalation in the number of civilians harmed and lives, livelihoods, and communities destroyed. They must comply with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The UN stands ready to intensify its work with all parties to assist them in taking the steps needed to halt the number of Afghan civilians killed and maimed from spiraling even further.
Syrian Democratic Forces have supervised the movement of men, women and children out of the last redoubt of the Islamic State group in eastern Syria. This is a video of a truck carrying civilians out of the holdout. The Islamic State has been accused of using civilians as shield against attacks, and the Syrian Democratic Forces said they will not continue fighting in the area if civilians were still inside.
At the moment, we are evacuating civilians who have surrendered to the Syrian Democratic Forces. Their number is high, at least 2,000 people. Another part is waiting for the vehicles to come out.
2 people are dead and 1 injured after a minibus hit a landmine while crossing the border between Ukraine and the breakaway Donetsk region. The bus hit the mine after swerving off-road in the buffer zone between the 2 border posts near the village of Yelenovka outside Donetsk. The passengers were returning to the rebel-controlled region after collecting their pensions.
Landmine explosion happened as a result of the driver's negligence because the landmine was located on the roadside. There are signs warning of landmines at certain distances everywhere here. It appears as though the driver wanted to overtake the line, drove over the landmine, and it exploded.
A Saharan elephant seal, thought to be from Antarctica, crossed more than 6,000 kilometers of sea and made Cape Town's beach its temporary home. The animal has made a nesting area for itself on Fish Oak Beach, a popular place with locals and tourists for swimming and whale watching. It is not the first time this seal, known as buffalo, has visited these shores.
It's not very often that the elephant seals, well, I mean, as I've heard, this one's basically been in the Cape Town area since 2014, but he's been showing up at various beaches, like unpredictably. Last season he was at Dacre Island for about 3 months. But still, it's a very rare animal in South Africa, so it's a very valuable opportunity to get, if you're into wildlife, if you're into animals, to come and see this seal. He's quite special.
And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at tellusorenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.